Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Tailosive Tech live on YouTube. Hope you're having a happy Wednesday. We've got a packed week of stuff, and then I'll be taking off for a while, so there's a decent chance this could be the last live stream for a while. But that's okay, because we've got a daring one. There's a poll for you all to vote on, so please make sure you vote. But yeah, the fate of my personal phone is up in the air right now because Mac Rumors received two different reports simultaneously. Yesterday, they had a source tell them, which they claim is reliable, that iOS 17 isn't coming to the 10 or the 8 or the 8 Plus. Basically, it's discontinuing the A11 chip devices. And then this morning, same site, not a different source, but a different source, but on the same news publication, comes forward saying, actually, now someone is saying the iPhone 10 will get iOS 17. So it makes me wonder, is this internal debate actually taking place right now at Apple? Are they on the... I bet what kind of happens every year is there's certain features that they can bring to, obviously, the newer iPhones and usually the iPhones of the past 3 or 4 years. But then when it comes back to how old do we want to go, they take out certain features, they take out certain things, like the iPhone 10 didn't get live text, didn't get subject lift, didn't get continuity camera, removes a bunch of things so that it can fit on a device this old. And then every year when they're optimizing iOS, they're like, okay, do we add some of the features, or do we just stop support, or do we bring as many as we can, or is it Apple just wondering, hey man, lots of people seem to be not upgrading their iPhone, we better not offer 6+ 7+ years of software support anymore, so it convinces people that they need to buy newer iPhone, because it's like, oh, it's not running the latest iOS, it's no longer running. So it's kind of up in the air, and that's why I thought it would be a good time for today's live stream to gauge the audience's perspective. Who do you trust, Mac Rumors or Mac Rumors? Because that's the current contradictory leaks. I almost made a video on it yesterday, but I ended up being real busy with, it was just tax season. Me and my wife worked on the taxes, and that took a while. But now that we took a day to let this leak develop a little bit, it's actually a bit more of a question. It's no longer, okay, the rumors are pointing towards iPhone 10 not getting iOS 17. Now it's like, the rumors aren't helping. Now some of them say it will, some of them say it won't, which is essentially the same as not knowing at all. They've completely canceled each other out. But yeah, on top of that, so let me know what you think makes the most sense, or do you think iOS 17 is going to be a large update, or is it a minor update? And if it's a minor update, does that make it easy to bring it to the iPhone 10? Or if it's a major update, do you think it's going to be more complicated to bring a lot of those features? My guess is that top requested features that Mark Gurman is referencing is probably just being able to put apps anywhere on the home screen, or maybe letting you customize these lock screen toggles. Or another one I saw people do concept art of recently that would be really simple is just close all apps. I know that people think that saves battery. I'm not doing it for battery. I'm doing it for bandwidth reasons. I don't want my device using extra internet consumption in the background. But if you could just activate multitasking and then there was a little close all button. We've been asking for that for years and it's never happened. And Apple's always been like, you don't actually need that feature. It's not important. And I'm like, it's not the battery thing. It's just the OCD thing some people have. Of just like all those apps running in the background. It kind of bothers them. Kill off the 8 because the 8 Plus, and keep the 10 around one more year, and then kill off 10, 10S, and 10R. Well, that's a whole different generation closer. iPhone 10 is basically the 8 Pro. They have the same insides. I thought, who told me, maybe I got my memory wrong, but doesn't the 8 Plus and the 10 have more RAM than the 8? Or am I getting that wrong? Tax season has been extended, but if you're paying quarterly like I am, you still got to make your payments before Q1 ends, and Q1 is ending in a couple weeks. Define major update. Lots of previous iOS versions haven't overhauled a whole lot. I guess my definition of major would be something you can... I don't know. Based on some people's discussion, I feel like iOS 7 was the only major iOS update, because they're like, well, that's the one with all the icons changed. If the icon doesn't change, nothing really changed. To me, a major update is one where the second the screen turns on, you can tell what iOS it's running. That's why I considered iOS 16 to be pretty major. Just from the lock screen changes alone, you could like immediately tell that this is not running iOS 15 just by looking at the lock screen and or looking at the home screen. Something on very surface level is changed. And there's been a lot of iOS updates where you can't really tell what version it's on unless you open the phone, start checking some apps, and start playing around with some designs. Then you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is iOS 12 or this is iOS 13 or 14. But another definition I was going to go with is a major iOS update is one where it discontinues a large number of devices. And the main reason in my previous videos, I predicted that iPhone 10 would get iOS 17 because iOS 16 already killed off a bunch of devices. So usually you have 1 year where you kill off a bunch of devices. A9 and A10 were killed off with iOS 16. Then you typically get that followed by more of a stability year where iOS 17 goes to all of the same devices that iOS 16 are currently running. So that's my prediction. I hope that's the case because I would obviously like to keep getting software support on the iPhone 10, but now a lot of the general public's belief in that is doubting. It's pretty neck and neck. Most of you guys seem to agree with me. 59% have voted yes. But still, 41%, that's a decent chunk. You know, more than a third are thinking it won't get it. A close all apps at once feature would be sweet. I know that it doesn't functionally really do anything, but yeah, I think it's something a lot of people have been asking for a while, and that's really all that Gurman is telling us is rumored to happen. They're adding something that we've been asking for a long time. And I'm like, okay, what have we been asking for a long time? I don't know. Mike trusts McDonald's. That's a good idea. Mac rumors versus Mac moomers. Mac mummers? Is that the term? I'll start Mac Rack Mummers as a website. iOS 16 had so much bugs that I feel bad if iPhone 8 and 8 Plus and 10 didn't get iOS 17. You feel bad if they don't? Oh, because that means they would die on iOS 16. I see what you're saying. Yeah. I would feel bad too. I think a stability update would be welcome. Are there really features that are new than older hardware can't run, or is it more planned obsolescence? It's kind of impossible to say, and I don't think it's necessarily a straight line down the middle. You know, like live text uses the neural cores of your Apple Silicon so that when you open a photo and there's text on it, the neural cores in the background are able to scan that photo, detect numbers and text, and then highlight them. And then basically right as you open up a picture, you get that little icon in the bottom of the 3 lines that says, hey, there's some text, do you want to highlight it? I think it's possible, given the A11 chip does have 2 neural cores, and also I've just seen websites and stuff that you can put pictures on that they scan and they analyze it for photos they analyze it for not pictures. They analyze it for numbers and text, and then they can highlight it. It's possible that, in my opinion, I think the iPhone 10 could do live text, but maybe it takes longer than what Apple is comfortable with. So they're like, well, it could have the feature, but it would take 5 to 6 seconds for the feature to show up, and that would make the end user more impatient, or that would create the illusion of the phone being slower, and we don't want not illusion, it would just make the phone feel slower to have that pop-up take forever to show up. So it's better off just not having that feature. And then we can debate, no, they should have it, even if it takes longer. Same thing with continuity camera. You know, I have an app on my Mac. I haven't been using it as much lately, but there's a free app you can get that will turn your phone, even the iPhone 10, it's called Webcam Plus, and that will turn your iPhone 10 into a webcam for your Mac. The problem is it has to be done via a wire, but it can be done. You can plug in a lightning cable. Thank you, Chris, for the super chat. Have some cash. You're a great YouTuber. Completely unnecessary, Chris, but thank you. That's very kind of you, and I think I'm an okay YouTuber, but thank you. I appreciate that. So essentially, there is a way for you to replicate continuity camera on your iPhone 10, even though Apple says that it can't do continuity camera. So it's not like a fine line as like, is it plain obsolescence or can the phone do it? It's like, well, it probably could do a version of it, like a lighter tier of it, but Apple has to make that call sometimes of, do we want to put a skimmed down, scaled down version of this feature, or do we just not include it at all? Sometimes that's a dictation of like, the software team is busy and it has a lot of devices to optimize for, and it can be a lot easier if we just kill off support for these devices, because the iPhone 8 Plus being a great example. There's lots of newer iPhones than the 10, like the 10s and the 11 Pro, that they are exact same screen size, exact same screen resolution. So optimizing this phone for iOS 17 and the iPhone 11 Pro for iPhone 17, not that hard, because they're the same size, same screen resolution and everything. So it's like, okay, this form factor is already being supported, but iPhone 8 Plus, different story. That was the last time Apple did a 1920 by 1080 resolution on a smartphone. It's the last plus-sized iPhone that has the home button. And at this point, it's actually the only plus-sized iPhone with a home button that's getting software support. iPhone 7 Plus did not get iOS 16 because it had the A10 chip. So even though I think there's a decent chance that iOS 17 will be fine running on the A11 chip, like my iPhone 10 has it, the A11 chip is also in the 8 Plus, but the 8 Plus is this different aspect ratio, different screen resolution than any other phone. So I could understand why, it's the only one that's supporting the landscape home screen and stuff like that. And they're trying to, I've heard they turn off landscape support on the 8 Plus if you have widgets on the home screen. So if you take away the widgets, you can still use it in landscape. But if you add widgets, again, it's more optimization and there's more edge cases. But yeah, 14 Plus doesn't have a home button. That's what I preference. But 14 Plus ruins everything. 14 Plus sucks. But yeah, so even though it has the chip to handle iOS 17, I can understand why Apple might want to discontinue support for the 8 Plus, because it's kind of this weird aspect ratio, weird resolution that doesn't really exist anymore on any other phone. Whereas iPhone 8, same screen size, same form factor, same resolution as the SE2, which isn't that old, from 2020. Of course, this is going to get iOS 17. And even more so, the SE3, which came out last year, that's probably going to get iOS 20, So they're keeping around the 4.7-inch, what is this, 760p? It's not 720p, but they're keeping around this form factor for a good long while. iPhone 8 Plus is in kind of this weird in-between zone. So that's why I kind of understand maybe wanting to kill it off sooner than we'd like. But, I mean, it did come out in 2017, so it would have still received 6 years of software support, even if they kill it this year. Doesn't Apple promise several years of support? I don't think legally. I think they are known for it, but I don't think there's anything in the terms, and I don't even think they advertise it. Like, when they unveil the iPhone, they don't say, we guarantee this will get at least 6 years of software support. Like, that's not a common thing. No, 1080p is not considered weird, but it's not common as a resolution on smartphones anymore. There's usually different. Most smartphones aren't 16 by 9 anymore. Usually they're an aspect ratio of 2 by 1, in which case it's 1080p one direction, but then it's 2000 the other, or it's 21 by 1080 or something. It's a little bit off. So to just find a smartphone today with the exact resolution of 1920 by 1080, that's pretty rare. And the 8 Plus is really the only iPhone that's using that resolution that's still getting software updates. But probably ditch the iPhone 10, then release the new SE after 6 to 3 months. Same form factor, high-end chip, and better camera. Battery than the 10, new sales stocks go brr. No, most of what Quo has been saying is that the SE tends to recycle existing designs. When the iPhone SE2 launched, this replaced the iPhone 8, which was in production at the time, so it was pretty easy to reskin this. iPhone 10 form factor or resolution or anything is not in production right now. So what Quo said is the next SE is likely to be very similar to that of an iPhone 14 /13/12. The squared off OLED 6.1 inch size. he said is the most likely to get recycled for the SE4. But then they'll just slap USB-C on there and probably not give it Dynamic Island and probably go eSIM only and maybe just have one camera on the back. I don't know the exact specs of it, but I think it will essentially look like an iPhone 12. Malik, thank you for the super chat. What shortcuts do you use on your iPhone 10? Siri shortcuts? Basically none. I'm sorry. I don't have a lot of shortcuts in mind. I probably should get more into that, but I've just never jumped on the shortcut train. I apologize. I wish I had a better answer for you. But I appreciate the super chat. White aluminum Apple Watch would be nice. Yeah, I've seen some silver ones that are close to white, but they got that freaking Ion X glass, which annoys me. Lucas says 2013 Mac Pro almost got a decade of support. Do you think the 2021 MacBook Pro will get the same? It's possible, yeah. I mean, it's impossible to know, to be honest, because Apple changes their mind on things, or in the future could decide, hey, not enough people are upgrading. Let's come up with features that only work on new hardware. So we discontinue MacBooks after 6 to 7 years and call it a day. But the Apple Silicon in the Macs is already really capable, and even with the switch to the 3nm architecture and the 1nm architecture and all that, it can only get so much faster and so much more efficient than what it's currently at, and it's going to take a long time for those chips to become available at scale. So yeah, I could visualize a situation like where the 2021 MacBook Pros get like 10 years of support. I think that's certainly possible, but I don't want to set that expectation like it's a guarantee. I don't want to tell all of you it definitely will. I'm just saying it's a reasonable prediction. I wouldn't say anyone was crazy or it's outlandish to assume such a thing. Thank you, Chris, for the super chat. Apple want you to buy a new phone. That's why they cut off success. Have some cash. You're a great YouTuber. You don't have to say it every time. Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Chris. But seriously, don't feel the need to super chat. It's really okay. Really don't think iPhone 10 will get iOS 17, but I hope it does. I mean, considering how many features that it doesn't get from iOS 16, I wouldn't be surprised at all if like it gets 17 but misses out on a lot of the cool stuff. Richard also is saying it won't get 17. If the iPhone 8 gets discontinued, the iPhone 10 will. That's typically how they discontinue it, is by the chip, usually not by the screen size or the form factor. Do I think this year's Apple Watch will get the blood pressure monitor? There's been almost like no leaks or rumors about that Lake Show, but I wish it would. It feels like they do 1 year with the new design, which is the Series 7, and then usually newer chip or something, or new health sensor on the next gen, which was a Series 8. Typically, if there's a pattern to align by, we had the Apple Watch Series 1 design for 3 generations. So then we got the Series 4 design, and they kept that through the 5 and the 6. So that would mean we keep this Series 7 design through the 7, 8, and 9, which means 9 will probably be exactly the same design as the 8, but maybe with a new chip or a new health sensor. But that's about it. So that's what I'm expecting. I don't think Apple Watch upgrades are going to be that major this year. Could you see a Stylus coming to the iPhone Ultra as long as it doesn't compromise with battery or water resistance? They'd add it for those who want it, but not force features for ones who don't. I feel like Apple could have done it by now if they were really interested in doing that. Like, Samsung's done it for years, and they never really found that much success with it. I mean, they keep doing it, but you notice they stopped doing Galaxy Note phones. Now they just incorporate the Pen and the Ultra because it's just simpler for them to combine the Note and the S phones into the same lineup. And they do Stylus on iPads for drawing and note taking and stuff, but I've used the Note phones. I've used a stylus on a phone, and I just don't think it's very useful. I don't think you can get that precise on a screen that small. You're faster just typing, and if you're drawing, it's not a very big screen to do drawing on. You can't draw very well on a screen that small, at least from what I can tell. I know people with the Galaxy Note phones, and they almost never use the stylus. Or if I saw them using it, they were using it for like scrolling. You know, they weren't like doing anything. It was just a little finicky thing to play with. So I personally don't think Apple will do a stylus. I don't think it was just because of the battery recall. They kept making Notes long after the Note 7. I just think they weren't selling very well. But we've definitely, oh my God, we've definitely got a lot of questions from the Tailosive Tech Pro members. Yeah, Steve Jobs would be rolling in his grave. That's a good point. Steve did not want a stylist on the phone, to be clear. He was not against a stylist, period. He just didn't think that the stylist on a phone was a good idea. That being said, Steve is gone, and Apple's done a lot of things that Steve didn't like. But I still just, I've tried it myself, and I understand why Apple has not tried to do it. 10S will get iOS 18 next year, all because of the Bionic part of the A12X, A12 Plus series chips and how much they've utilized it lately. A11 is also called Bionic, but okay. Anyway, Oliver the Buy says, will MagSafe ever come to the iPad, or would it just be impractical since the battery is so big and it uses 30-watt charging bricks, and MagSafe only comes, MagSafe charges only half at 15 watts? I don't even think it's an inefficiency problem. I just think it's a form factor problem. Like, MagSafe makes a lot of sense for a device that you sit flat on like a desk, and iPads just typically, you don't do that. Usually you put them in a shelf or you put them propped up, and iPads have keyboard cases and wraparound folio cases and stuff. So to have a giant ring or a glass back just so you can drop your iPad flat on something and have it more inefficiently charge, I think that drives the price up. It makes the charging worse. It makes it harder to use, and you'd have to align a device that large that you have to align that precisely. The benefits of the magnets aligning to the coil is kind of diminished when you're using it on a device that large. So either you'd have to come up with a giant MagSafe puck that's even bigger than the current one, which feels even dumber. So maybe if there's some way to attach accessories to the back, or to have your iPad snap to the wall or something, or for the HomePod with a speaker or something. Maybe there's a way for MagSafe technology, like we see the MagSafe battery pack and the MagSafe wallet, maybe turning the iPad into more MagSafe accessory support. I could see, but just for the sake of charging, Oliver, no, I don't think it will, at least in the near term. There was a lot of rumors that Apple would do that, and it never turned into anything. That rumor ended up being completely either made up or just way off. Piroski says, I've been having a lot of issues with my Windows PC for gaming and have been considered selling it to get a Mac Mini and a gaming console. I game pretty often and do general web browsing, but I'm getting tired of Windows Tower PCs. Thoughts? Yeah, I'm right there with you. I had horrible experiences with my Windows PCs and the Tower PCs I had. They were just unreliable, and driver corruption problems and random restarts, and they were just buggy in general. It was just not a consistent experience. And you know, I'm not into gaming now, but when I was trying to get more into gaming, I found it a lot more reliable and a lot more fun to just have a Mac for my, video editing and general web browsing, like you're saying. And then I have a console, which is much more plug and play. It boots up a lot faster. Usually you don't even need to enter a password like you do on a PC, and your games are just right there. Usually they boot up pretty quick. So I'm right there with you. I think there's still a lot of advantages to PC gaming, but I'm not really a gamer, so I can't give you too much advice other than, yeah, that seems like a reasonable compromise to me. And then we kind of talked about Hasael's question. That's what we somewhat kicked off the stream with. But no, for the record, even if my iPhone 10 does not get iOS 17, my plan is not to buy an iPhone 15. That is not my go-to. I keep trying to remind everybody that my backup plan is not, okay, my $200 iPhone doesn't get software support, therefore I should upgrade to the latest iPhone. It's like, no, that's not the plan. I'm reading one day old comments because these are from our Tailosive Tech Pro members, and I can only live stream during certain times in the day. So the people that are supporting the channel directly, I like to prioritize because they're helping me out a bit, and they don't have to, and they're not required to. But some people are not available when I go live. So if you're a Tailosive Tech Pro member, you can ask the question long before I go live. That way you can get it addressed when you go back and watch the stream after the fact, because a lot of the time people have questions, but they just don't get answered because I'm not live at the time that they're free. But I'm glad to see Purosky is here. He says, I've spent thousands of dollars on my system and I still have issues, so I'm getting tired of it. Yeah, I did too. I know exactly what you mean. But it'll be interesting if any specific feature gives you an itch and leads you to upgrading to the 15 series. I doubt that there would be a specific software feature because they're going to unveil iOS 17 before the 15 comes out, before the iPhone 15 comes out. So I don't think there will be a software feature that convinces me to buy the iPhone 15 that's baked into iOS 17 at least. Maybe there's something that's only on the iPhone 15, but we're not gonna know about that till September. We're not gonna know about that in June. And then his next question was, would you rather guest star on an Apple TV Plus show or be the star in a product commercial? Which is kind of funny. I like acting, so I would much rather be, I guess, a guest star on a TV Plus show, because then I could try to get into a character that would be a bit more fun than just, I don't know, commercials don't sound that exciting to me. I don't think I would enjoy being in a product commercial. Okay, eUpload says, do you think Apple's VR headset will be a success, or do you think it will be a failure and I consider buying one when it comes out? I think there's been a lot of firsts with Apple where everyone thought it would be a failure, you know? It happens a lot. You know, the iPhone people thought would be a failure. Same thing with the iPad. A lot of people doubted the iPod even when they unveiled that, and same thing with the Apple Watch. I was around for that. I was pretty engaged in the tech community and watching lots of tech videos. And when the Apple Watch came out, people all thought it was a joke. You know, Steve Jobs is rolling in his grave, and this is terrible. And that turned into the best watch in the world. A very similar reaction to AirPods. I remember that very vividly because I was making tech videos, and everyone thought AirPods were overpriced, stupid, and expensive, and that turned into one of the biggest portions of their business. So, that being said, simultaneously, I've tried VR headsets. I've tried mixed reality and all that, and I find it incredibly gimmicky. I do not use it on a daily basis, and it sounds like statistically the shipments for VR headsets is not very high. It's not very popular. I mean, it's a very passionate niche. There's some people that use them a lot and they're very happy with them, but the people that are enjoying them is not a significant portion of the population. I think it's very hard to market, and it's usually pretty expensive. It's not something you can use on the go because your face is covered usually. So I personally think, like, at this point, based on the rumors we've heard about Apple Reality Pro, based on what the leaks are pointing to, it doesn't seem like a good deal. It doesn't seem like something I would plan on buying or using. Yeah, $3,000 is way too expensive for something that everyday people would consider buying and using. So as far as I can tell, this feels like a big mistake. It feels like a big misstep. It's overpriced and stupid until it becomes practical. That's kind of the train of events we've seen with a lot of Apple products. So I think it's naive of us to just judge it before they've even had a chance to sell us on it. They haven't unveiled it yet. They haven't told us what the target demographic is or what they want people to use it for. So in my opinion, it's too early to make a final judgment call on whether or not it'll be a success. Way too early. Even several years after the first generation launches, it's probably still too early because, you know, a lot of people didn't buy the Apple Watch until the Series 3 or the Series 4 and then or the SE came out. Once it started getting more affordable and a bit more practical, that's when it started to find its stride and kind of went mainstream. So could be a very similar thing with Apple Reality Pro. Maybe the first generation sucks and not that many people buy it, not that many people like it, but maybe a couple generations go by, it gets cheaper, it gets more practical, it gets better battery life, and then more people end up using it on a regular basis. So I love speculation. I love talking about the leaks and the rumors, but I don't think we should come to very definitive conclusions on unreleased hardware like that. So for the same reason, that's why I feel like people always misunderstand my arguments or don't hear me say these things, probably because I make so much content, it's hard to keep up with it. But what I keep saying right now is I'm not saying I won't buy the iPhone 15. I'm not saying I will buy the iPhone 15. I'm saying let's wait and see. I'm talking about the leaks. I'll talk about the rumors. I'm interested, and I like covering the rumors and speculating on what Apple's planning for these solid-state buttons. And I can tell you, so far, nothing rumored about the iPhone 15 is convincing me to upgrade to it. I'm not sold on it based on the rumors, but once Apple comes out with it, says here's its features, here's its pricing, then we can talk about it more and say, okay, is this worth it or not? But I'm no longer doing that like preemptive thing. I did it last year, and I kind of don't think it's fair anymore. I don't think I should, before the product has even come out, write it off like, no, I would never buy that. I don't want to buy that. Do I own a 14 or 14 Pro? Neither. I own a 10. That's why there's a my in the title. I don't own a 13 or a 12 or any of that. Thank you, Connor, for 6 months of support. Will the iPad Pro first gen have iPadOS 17? We're getting conflicting reports, so that's kind of the complicated part. Is like, yesterday, Mac Rumors had a source that said iPad Pro first gen won't get it, and then today they got a report that said it will. So, because iPadOS is usually so boring and so insignificant, and they barely bring anything to iPadOS, I'm gonna guess it will get iPadOS 17. But again, we've got reports supporting my argument, and we've got reports discrediting my argument. So, and they're both from relatively the same site, so it's kind of hard to deal with. Kirk Jones asked, any news on the new Mac Pro coming, new monitors released with it? I would think so. Ross Young has said they've been working on a larger sized mini LED panel for quite some time. I don't think it'll be ready to ship in June, based on what Ross Young is saying about the Pro Display XDR update or whatever. But yeah, there's the most recent reports. There hasn't been any updates on it since I last talked about the Mac Pro. But the most recent reports on the Apple Silicon Mac Pro is that it's not that different. It will basically be the same design as the current Mac Pro, and they're just going to put a M2 Ultra, which is two M2 Maxes stitched together, and call it a day. And it won't be as modular as the current Mac Pro. It sounds very disappointing, to be honest, from all of the reports about it. They've kind of scrapped the idea of redesigning the chassis or giving it an extreme chip where you stitch 4 M2 Maxes together. No, now they're just saying just an M2 Ultra. And that will still be the fastest Mac ever, but just not that different looking. And that will probably, I would expect that to get unveiled at Dub. Maybe a site refresh before then. I don't think we're going to get a spring event, but depending on how boring it is, maybe if they're not very proud of it or not very excited by it, they'll just drop it as a site refresh. Joshua says the messed up weather app in iOS 16.4, but yes, I can also agree, Joshua. I've had issues with the weather app. That's a bug I am experiencing, but it sounds like everybody's. That seems like more of a server-wide issue. Sisualizer's been supporting for 16 months. Wow, thank you for your membership. That's very kind of you. Yes, I sold my 13 Pro Max. You don't have any iPhone above the 10? No, I've bought phones and then sold them, but kept the packaging, or I've had boxes. Most of my Apple collection are gifts. I pretty much have never bought an Apple box or an old Apple product just for the sake of, I would like to have a collection. Usually what happens is people just give me their old boxes. So that's why I have, iPhone. A friend of mine gave me the 14 Pro box, even though I don't own a 14 Pro. This is, let me make sure that stays there. Please don't fall. This was my box for my 13 Pro Max. I don't have the phone anymore, but I still got the box. Same exact story with my 12 mini. I used that for 10 months. Still have the box, don't have the phone. Oh no, these things are falling out. Great. Hopefully it can stay there. Okay, cool. I appreciate the support, Visualizer. Thank you. Do you expect a price increase this year for the US iPhones? Sort of. I honestly thought we were going to get one last year. I was very shocked that we didn't. I know overseas there were price hikes, but in the US the pros were the same. Because they're gaining Type-C and probably faster ports, and most of the rumors right now are pointing towards the 15 Pro getting titanium chassis. Titanium tends to cost more than stainless steel. I think it'll probably go up about $100 for the 15 Pro and the 15 Ultra, maybe more. I hope they don't call it 15 Pro Max. I never liked the term Pro Max, to be honest, but I think the Pros will get more expensive, but the regular iPhones will stay the same. I think it will still, the regular 15 will be $829, 15 Plus will be $929, and they'll have Dynamic Island and 60 Hertz and USB-C, but it'll be the slower USB-C, because there's been, most of the rumors are that Apple was disappointed by the sales of the Plus iPhone, And I think it's mostly because the Plus iPhone is too close in price to the Pros. There's more people just opting all the way for the Pro because it wasn't that much more than the Plus. So if their theory is probably if we widen the gap between the Plus and the Pro, maybe more people will opt for the Plus. And if people end up still opting for the Pro, then hey, at least we got more money out of them, because the 14 Pros ended up selling really, really well. And I think it was probably because the price was lower than they needed it to be. Because they're selling so well, and there's a bunch of people that are just in the habit now of just, I'm going to buy the new iPhone every year, and I'm going to get the best iPhone I can. There's a bunch of people that are paying monthly anyway. They're not paying the upfront price. So it's like those people, they don't care if it's $1,100 versus $1,000. Like they're going to pay it anyway. I thought you just bought everything Apple released, had that assumption. I don't know why people assume that. That would be kind of wasteful. How many more years do you think the iPad Pro 2020 will get? I don't see an upgrading as not much has changed. No, I haven't upgraded my 2018 Pro. Nothing has really changed since then either. I would expect the iPad Air 2, I believe, got 7 or 8 years of support, so I don't know why the 2020 Pros wouldn't get more than that. I would expect at least 7 or 8 years, maybe 9 or 10. It's easy when they don't do anything. iPadOS, if you bought a non-Pro iPad, all they did was add not the calculator, they still haven't done that. All they did was add the weather app, which doesn't even work anymore. All they did with iPadOS 16 was if you're not buying an iPad that's a Pro, if you're just buying a older Air or a Mini, the difference is weather. That's it. There's really very little changes. Let's see. How will they release the VR headset and Mac Pro at DubDub? They can't have one more things at events. I think they could, but I don't personally think the Mac Pro is a one more thing. I don't think the Mac Pro is that exciting. I mean, Apple in a keynote last year acknowledged that they will switch the Mac Pro to Apple Silicon. Like they publicly stated, all that's left is the Mac Pro, but we're going to save that for another day. It's like, okay, I don't think it's a big deal based on the rumors surrounding it. I hope the rumors are wrong. It would be cool if the Mac Pro, they actually update the design and made it more modular or something upgradable. But frankly, I think we're hitting that law of diminishing returns when it comes to computer performance where, okay, who is unhappy with the performance they're getting out of the Mac Studio with the M1 Ultra? This is the fastest Mac ever made. It beats out the performance of the Intel Mac Pro that cost $50,000. And this Mac Studio is like $8,000. And it's like the fastest Mac ever. How many people need something faster than that? And then on top of that, how many people want something faster than that are willing to pay for it? That are willing to pay the $10,000 plus in order to get the Mac Pro. It's probably not a huge market. It's likely not that many people. It's a few YouTubers, and that's about it. The big enterprise companies and businesses, they have these custom servers and custom software. I don't think they're using macOS all that much. And I just think that the market for it is so niche that it's probably just going to be picture the Mac Pro now. It just has M2 Ultra in it. And maybe they update the Pro Display XDR with mini LED, so it has more dimming zones. That's kind of it. I don't think it's a one more thing. I don't think it's a big deal. I think could easily be a site refresh where we just wake up one day and say, now the Mac Pro has Apple Silicon. No design changes. Probably the most exciting update to me is if they switch the Magic Mouse to USB-C. Now the Mac Pro comes with a Magic Keyboard that's Type-C, and ooh, cool. I would just like new monitors from Apple, honestly. We'd like them, but the pricing isn't going to be any better than we'd like. It's probably still going to be a real expensive monitor and real expensive Mac Pro that's less modular, and most people are going to be like, oh, that's not really worth it. So I could totally see Apple Reality Pro being a one more thing or a big announcement type deal, but I expect that if they do announce it at DubDub, which Quo says they won't, Gurman says they will, so it's kind of up in the air. But what's most likely, I think most people can all agree on this, if they do unveil the headset at DubDub, it's not going to be shipping. It's just an unveiling, and then it'll ship later in the year. They might just ship dev kits for software developers to write code for it, but it'll be in very limited volumes. Like you'll have to pay the $4,000 in order to access the dev kit, and they'll probably even require you to send it back when you're done with testing it and everything, and there'll be all these strict guidelines on not opening it or contracts you got to sign to have access to it. So maybe they unveil it at DubDub, but I think it's possible they'll be light on details. They'll have some cool advertisements of people reaching around at holograms and stuff, but then they won't ship it for a while. So they might not even give us pricing. They might just say coming later this year. They've done stuff like that before. You know, the Apple Watch, I think they said the starting price when they first unveiled it, but they didn't get much more specific than that. They just said it starts at $349, and they didn't talk about the steel ones costing $500, $600, or the gold ones costing $10,000 to $15,000. You know, they didn't dive into very many details. So I think it's very possible that they could tease the headset, give us some use cases for it, showcase how cool it is, and try to sell us on the idea first of how useful and how practical it would be, and then delay the numbers. So we just have lots of time to speculate, and also software developers have time to come up with use cases for it, but they don't dive into the actual price. Let's see. Is it just me, or have iOS and iPadOS animations become more bouncy? Well, with the switch to more gestures, yeah, they probably feel kind of bouncy. I agree the Magic Mouse with MagSafe would be a good idea, but part of the EU law that's going into effect next year is switching all kinds of computer accessories to Type-C if the device is large enough to accommodate for it, and this definitely is. So in the EU, at least, they'll probably have to do a USB-C Magic Mouse and keyboard. Although I'd be happy with MagSafe. Just drop it on the little puck and it charges. That'd be cool. Did iOS 17 ruin the iPhone 10's battery life? I don't know. We haven't got iOS 17 yet. But I think it's kind of hard to tell because most people using the iPhone 10 in 2023 usually are experiencing battery health that's a lot worse anyway. So in my experience, it's still not great, but it never really was that great. I feel like Apple will be endlessly mocked over the VR headset for a while. That's the case with pretty much every Apple product. Can you name an Apple product they weren't mocked for? People mocked the Notch. Samsung mocked the Notch. People mocked the iPad. People mocked the Apple Watch. People mocked the AirPod. Like, everything gets mocked that they do. There's not really a way around that. Do I think the Apple Watch should get an under-display webcam for FaceTime, etc.? I don't personally think it's a good idea. For one, camera on a watch would eat into your battery life super heavily. It's also not a good angle. I've been saying this for years, but we're still talking about it, so I'm still answering. Take the front-facing camera, put it on where your watch would be, and then look at your face. It's very awkward. It's like, it would look like the whole FaceTime call would be looking up your nostrils. Like, the whole reason we take selfies like this is because this is not the flattering angle. That's why I'm not talking to you guys like this, right? Is because this looks awkward and kind of uncomfortable. But to keep it more level, or if anything, it's better to have the camera up higher. But if you try to put your watch up here, your arm gets tired very, very quickly. So it would eat into your battery life, drive the cost up. Not only would it consume a lot of power, but it would take up more space inside the watch, so the battery couldn't be as big, and the angle wouldn't be very good. So I personally completely understand why they haven't put a camera on the watch. And I think even if there was one, you probably wouldn't use it all that much in the first place. Just leave iPhone 10 on iOS 16 and give it a dignified death. No, I mean, what we were saying earlier is that iOS 16 is really buggy, which is why they should give it iOS 17 so that it can die in peace, Walter. It can die peacefully on a stable update that's not so unreliable. AJ says, I wonder what's new on crapOS 17 soon. I don't even know which one you're referring to. I think it's going to be mostly a stability update that maybe allows for one or two features that have been big requests for a long time, like putting apps anywhere on the home screen or closing all apps in the background. Something big like that isn't very technically complicated, but just makes iOS 17 feel like a bigger update than it really is. Let's see. just like iOS 11 into 12. Yeah, exactly, Chad. That's that they let a lot of devices die on iOS 12 because iOS 11 was so bad, and so unreliable. I would prefer if they changed Pro Max to Ultra. Yeah, I don't like the naming of Pro Max. It's just seems unnecessary to have two, like just one suffix to describe which product you're referring to is fine. I would have been okay with Max. Just like we have AirPods Max, we have M1 Pro and M1 Max. We don't need to have M1 Pro Max. That just gets annoying. Having two different suffixes is the Internet Telephone Professional Maximum 11. Yeah, that's fun. Oh, crap OS equals iPad OS. Thank you, AJ. That answers that question. Yeah, my guess is all of Apple's attention is still I've given up all hope on iPad OS being meaningful. I think all of the attention from the software team is on iOS right now, and especially during the recession, they're not putting much attention towards iPad OS, and it'll probably just get all the same things iOS 17 gets, and maybe a couple things it leaves out even. Let's see. I want to watch the beginning of stream. I'm afraid you'll delete before I can finish. I don't delete these. You can watch them after the fact, and I put them as audio podcasts on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. Trust me, there's like multiple copies, and I still have backups on my computer. I don't delete these streams. You can scroll back. I'm not gonna delete anything. Android got Apple Music, Apple TV, FaceTime Lite. I am seeing MagSafe cases for Android. What is next? Sideloading, it seems like. I think the EU has passed a law on that at least in the European Union, they're going to be required to allow apps, or I think even iMessage is going to be required to be cross-platform in that market. I don't think they're going to bring it to the US. Software is a pretty easy thing to restrict regionally. So in the EU, they may let you start doing sideloading in a couple of years, but in the US, probably not. Bold take, but I think iPad will get discontinued in a few years and its features will just merge into iPhone and the Mac. I don't think so because of the Apple Pencil. I think that iPads serve their purpose for the low-end market. I have my issues with the $1,000 plus iPads, but for the iPad mini market, and keep in mind, the vast majority of iPads that are selling are like $300. That's the best seller. And the people buying the $300 iPad, they're using it for reading, they're using it for note-taking or drawing, very basic things that the iPad has been capable of doing since 2015. So I don't think they'll kill it off. I just think that it could be doing a lot more than it's currently doing. And I also think we're probably... Here's my trajectory for the lineup of the Mac and the iPad long-term. This is what I think is going to happen. So right now we're kind of at the end. We've kind of closed the book on the Intel transition, right? Like we've pretty much switched the entire lineup over to Apple Silicon. Mac Pro is the exception, but Mac Studio basically replaces what the Mac Pro was anyway, and is not really a need or point in having a bigger Mac Pro with Apple Silicon. I know we're going to get one, but it's just weird. I don't think it's necessary, but... Okay, the Mac has had all this love and attention. We got our mini LED, we got our ProMotion, we got our legacy ports back, we got Apple Silicon, which is way faster, way better battery life. So Apple's engineering efforts and software efforts all went into the transition to ARM, right? We've kind of wrapped that up now. We're getting back to the stage of incremental updates, where just a couple months ago, we got our M2 MacBook Pros, and they look identical. They're just a little bit faster, a little bit better battery life. For the most part, it's just a spec boost, right? That's why it was a site refresh, not part of a keynote. And that's probably what a lot of the future of the Mac is going to look like for the next few years. It's like, okay, now we got 3nm chips. That sounds exciting to the tech community, but what does that really mean? All it means is faster speeds, better battery life. Okay, design-wise, pretty much stays the same. Maybe in a couple years we get OLED, but what is OLED really? It's a hype word. It sounds fun to be like, oh, MacBook with an OLED panel. But at the end of the day, it's just more incremental upgrades. All it means is a little bit better brightness, a little bit better dynamic range, maybe a little bit higher resolution. It's all just a little bit of spec boost across the board. So once we get back into the realm of, okay, Apple Silicon is now standard, MacBooks are just getting incremental upgrades. And like we talked about in the previous stream, I also don't think they're going to take away legacy ports for a long time. Now that they've given up on the concept of going all in with USB-C and they brought back HDMI and the SD card slot, is like, okay, now you can't really get rid of those again because now the industry standard has agreed. All these Windows laptops have those ports and MacBooks have those ports. So there's very little motivation for the third-party companies developing accessories and stuff. Very little motivation for them to discontinue or adopt USB-C because we've already made the switch. We've already made the adoption of HDMI and SD card slot, and Apple's not fighting it anymore, so definitely the third parties aren't going to fight it. So once the MacBook line is kind of stabilized and it's just in the routine of once or twice a year we get a new Mac with a new chip, and then it'll be M3. Yay, M3 is so fast and so much better. And then a year goes by. Now it's M4. Yay, a little bit faster, a little bit better. Now it's M5. Now it's M6. Now it's like, okay, wait a minute. This is kind of getting old. We kind of know where this is going. And as the chips get faster and the battery life gets better, there's less and less reasons for you to upgrade because there's very little differences generation to generation. To me, that's when it'll make more sense to overhaul the iPad line and say, okay, iPad's been good at the basics for a while now. You can do some light coding. You can do some light video editing and photo editing. You've got the Thunderbolt. You've got the silicon in there for it to do much more. Now, let's start bringing more macOS functionality, whether that means completely revamping iPadOS or it just means dual boot macOS on there. It doesn't matter, whatever you want to call it. But just bringing basically Mac functionality to the iPad. That's when Apple can convince us all to buy $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 iPads because they're going to have the chips for them and they're going to have better displays, bigger displays, better ports, and they'll have the software to justify it. Plus, you got to buy a $300, $400 keyboard case or a $100 Apple Pencil to go along with it. And that's when the iPad line can start to eat into the MacBook sales a bit more. And Apple will be okay with that because it costs more. The iPad is inherently spec for spec more expensive than the Mac. So my theory is that Apple is maybe just letting the MacBooks take the spotlight right now because they're going through this big transition away from Intel. So convince us all to drop big money on our Apple Silicon MacBooks, then let a couple of years go by and try to sell us on these two-in-one devices that are really capable at all the things our Macs can do, but also you can disconnect the keyboard, use a stylus with it, and have a two-in-one product that's super capable, super optimized, great battery life, great speakers, great I/O and all that. Probably not legacy ports, and they'll just say, if you need the legacy ports or if you want the better battery life, you got to buy a MacBook. But if you want a two-in-one, you go all in on Type-C. You have a little bit worse battery. You get worse battery life because it's thinner and it's got a tablet. You got to hold it and stuff. But it's just not time yet. So the iPad is in like hibernation mode. That's my hope. I hope that's the long-term plan. I don't think they need to bring a touchscreen to the Mac, but bringing more Mac functionality to the iPad is perfectly reasonable to me because they've already brought keyboard and mouse support to the iPad. So it's not that crazy. iPad Pro Mini. Yeah, I would love that too, but it's probably never going to happen. James says, Apple already convinced me to buy a $2,000 iPad. I just split it between the Mini 6, Pro 11-inch, and the Air 4. Oh my God. Yeah, well, now they'll convince you to buy $3,000, $4,000 iPads. That way they get $12,000 out of you. Joshua said, I had a touchscreen Windows PC before I switched to Mac. Touchscreens are so impractical and purposeless on desktop devices that is really a waste. Otherwise, perfectly good touch panel. I generally agree, but I still see a market for making the iPad more functional, essentially. Bringing macOS to iPads, I think, is a good idea. Bringing touchscreens to MacBooks, I don't think is a good idea. There is a difference. I would like iPad Pro to get macOS, but if not that, at least just make iPadOS more practical. You know, there's a huge, I've done wish lists on it several times now. You can go back and watch them. There's huge lists of things that iPadOS still can't do that are very basic things that my Mac can do, even an old Mac that's slower than an iPad can do. Just all comes down to software, which is crazy. That it's like, why can't this iPad has the chip, it has the display, it has the connectivity to do It has the ports. It has everything it needs to do Final Cut or Xcode or any of that stuff. Why can't it do it? Oh, because Apple decided it's an iPad, so therefore the software isn't allowed to have it. When I worked at Apple, I sold a lady a 12.9-inch 2 terabyte iPad Pro with Magic Keyboard case and pencil. Oof. Yikes. I hope she used it. I like iPadOS. I just want better file management. That's one thing on the big list, but again, it's not the only thing. There's a bunch of little things. I feel like the iPad is more of a streaming tool / painting palette device. The problem is it has been that since 2015. Like, you can use an iPad from 2015 or 2016 that is a great streaming tool / painting palette device. The problem is it's never gone anywhere since then. The hardware has gotten much better. They've gotten bigger. They've gone mini LED. They've gotten Thunderbolt. They've gotten M1, M2 chips. But the software has stayed mostly the same all those years. The software has not really changed much in capability. It's always just been, you can do some light video editing or some light photo editing. But if you really want the fully fledged software for video editing or software writing or video editing, audio editing, you got to get a Mac. And it's not because the Mac has any inherent hardware advantage. It's literally just the software that's running on it. So to me, that's stupid. Ethan, thank you for the super chat. Just ditched my spot earlier in stream to remind everyone Apple killed live wallpapers in favor of long pressing to change lock screen, and I hate it. Well, not only that, this phone has the hardware to do 3D touch. So technically, it should be completely possible for me to hold down on the wallpaper to edit it like this, or I should be able to press hard, and that would animate the live wallpaper. There's a way for me to tell this phone 3D touch versus long touch, and yet they refuse to acknowledge that. They didn't let that feature stay, which annoys me. They totally didn't have to kill it off, and they did. So even more reason to not fall in love with 3D touch, because over time it's gonna just become harder and harder to keep using a device that has it. Do you think Apple has a big idea for iPadOS and they are incrementally updating it, or do you think Apple has no idea what features to add for iPadOS? I don't think it's a big idea. I think it's just negligence. I think all of the software engineering is going towards iOS right now. I think the macOS team is probably totally separate. I think iPadOS is mostly run by iOS engineers. And because the iPhone has become such a huge, like, bread and butter for Apple, it's over 1 billion active iPhones, I think, on Earth now. And there's so much backwards compatibility. You know, that's what this whole debate is about. Will they optimize iOS 17 for a phone like this? That's taking up so much of their time. And the iPad is just relatively not that big a chunk of their business that there's just not much time and attention. And the iPads that are selling are not the pros. It's not the video editors. It's not the audio engineers. It's not the software engineers that are working on iPads. It's mostly people that are buying, you know, like you said, media consumption. I use my iPad because it's bigger than my phone, and I can watch videos on a big screen, or I can take notes and draw with a pencil. It covers that basic stuff just fine. It's covered it for years, and it still does today. So they're like, the vast majority of our iPad sales are $300 basic iPads. And we make a ton of money off of the accessories, off the keyboard cases, the folio. So they're not like in a big rush to make the iPad really practical, because the relative portion of iPad sales that are pros are pretty tiny. So making that tiny demographic more happy isn't really like justified in their case. And most of Apple's attention right now is on the iPhone, and then when it comes to the desktops and the Mac, it's about getting away from Intel, optimizing that transition, which again I think they're basically done now. They've pretty much transitioned the whole lineup away from Intel. And the Mac has gone through these big redesigns. You know, the iMac got redesigned, the MacBook Air got redesigned, the MacBook Pro got redesigned. So there was a lot of engineering focus on updating this language, this design language for the software and the hardware. But I think once the Mac line has kind of stabilized, and we're on our way now to that point where it's just chip upgrades practically, and maybe slightly better display upgrades here and there, thinner bezels or brighter screen or slightly higher pixel density. After that, it's going to hopefully they'll go back to the iPad and say, okay, let's actually put some software attention towards this, and then maybe you could actually get some macOS engineers working on the iPad rather than just iOS engineers that are doing it like a little side project. eUpload says, which new features do you want to see added in macOS 14? Not a lot, but on the top of my list is still a charge limiter. I want to be able to manage my battery state of charge. Don't optimize battery charging sucks. It's not good at figuring out my charge routine, and I have to use this buggy third-party software called Al Dente that's already... I have it set to 80% and my battery's at 87%. So once again, it's not working properly. That should be a native feature. I have it on my car, and it works very, very easily, very, very intuitively. There's just a little dot on the charge bar, and you select like charge to 60%, charge to 80%, charge to 100%. And it would preserve my battery health a lot more if I could just set a charge limit and say, only charge to full when I explicitly ask you to. And the rest of the time, especially with MacBooks, right? MacBooks are docked for a lot of people. They're at our desks plugged into external monitors for weeks on end, and just occasionally disconnected when you want to travel or take it with you or use it on the couch or whatever. And if I'm just using it on the couch, I don't need 100% of the battery, right? I'm just going to be there for a couple hours, probably doing some light web browsing or whatever, watching a movie. I don't need the full charge because the battery life is so good on these things. I suppose that charge limiter is my number one request. Other than that, I got one. Something that actually, the one thing that iPadOS gets better than macOS, there's not a lot, but this is one of them. Bluetooth audio sharing is much harder to do on the Mac. It's not impossible, but it's much harder to do than it is on the iPad or the iPhone. On the iPhone, just baked into AirPlay in Control Center, there's this real easy thing where you can just open it up, tap the little icon, and then you'll have your AirPods there, and you can just select two AirPods. So I use that a lot when we're traveling. If me and my wife are on a plane or at an airport, we want to watch a show, but we don't want to, use the speakers, disturb the people around us. You should just be able to tap the AirPods that are in people's ears so that the one device can send audio to two pairs of AirPods simultaneously. iPad does it just fine. It's very simple. It's very intuitive. It's not complicated. And iPhone does it just fine. The MacBook, though, oh my God, it's like it's so annoying. You have to go into, what is it called? Audio MIDI setup, create a multi-output signal that selects both the AirPods. And then even when you select both the AirPods, you can't change the volume. Like, the volume is locked in that position. You can't press the volume keys to adjust the volume of the AirPods. Whereas the iPad, like my wife is using AirPods 2, which don't have active noise cancellation, and my AirPods Pro do have active noise cancellation. So she typically has to turn up her AirPods 2 louder in order to cancel out the background audio, whereas I don't have to turn up mine as loud because they have the noise cancellation. So she'll typically set her volume to like 70-80%, and mine's at like 50 or 60%. And even when you control the volume on the iPad volume buttons or the iPhone volume buttons, it adjusts both. It'll put down my volume and hers at the same time, or turn up hers and turn up mine at the same time. Relative, it doesn't lock them to the same volume, but it adjusts them relatively. It works great. The Bluetooth is the same on the iPad and the iPhone that it is on the Mac. It's just a software limitation. That's really it. So yeah, charge limiter, Bluetooth audio sharing could be much better. That's one of the only reasons we take our iPad on trips is for media consumption and the ease of the Bluetooth connectivity. MacBook has the far bigger, far better display, but I don't use it to watch content a lot if it's me and my wife listening because the AirPods thing is so complicated. I don't use it very often, but I have a 2018 12.9-inch iPad Pro, but this has mostly been retired. I don't use it for that much anymore. It stays on the second shelf, and it dies a lot. I can't think of much else I would want for macOS. iCloud backup, that'd be a lot of storage depending on which MacBook you buy. Ethan super chatted. He says, I'm wasting money, but iPhone XS Gold is better than everything. Yeah, you are wasting money. I don't know about better than everything. I think we can see macOS icons come to iOS 17, so it feels like a major update, but is a stability update. What do you think? I think people over-exaggerate. I just don't get excited for icon updates. That's why I've been suggesting a theme pack for so long. I was like, there's some people out there that really care about the app icon. Like, why isn't iMessage blue? It's like, who cares? It's a part of the screen that you tap to open an app. Like, what's the big deal? Why do you care what it looks like so much? And now we're talking about like, well, does the shading of the iMessage app icon match the shading of the macOS iMessage app icon? I'm like, whatever. So if you had theme packs that people could buy and third parties could come up with their own theme packs, and it would have, 200 commonly used apps built into it that you could access. You have the most popular apps like Twitter, Snapchat, WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram. You have all the most popular ones, and people can have free ones or they can have paid ones, and Apple can take a fee. I've been saying for years, like, let people just have a theme and people are already doing this with Siri shortcuts. So when people are like, that destroys the simplicity and consistency of iOS, it's like, people are already doing that. I've seen so many people that get these, that it takes forever to get the theme pack and not the theme pack, but get the app icon that launches the Siri shortcut, and people make their own custom packs with iOS already. It just takes way longer. If there was just an integrated way to do it really quickly and very easily through the iOS App Store, where you can just hit buy, and then in settings you can just switch to this theme pack, or it doesn't have to be a paid thing. You could have free ones. Then you can have the macOS icon theme pack, or Apple could even get in on it. They could have the iOS 6 theme pack, and it takes you back to the iOS design that was pre-iOS 7, before Johnny Ive took over the software. Like, there's so many theme packs people could do if you really, really care about the app icons. But just changing the default one for the sake of changing it, I don't see the point in that, to be honest. What is my favorite non-Apple tech product of all time? And Tesla doesn't count. Wow. Okay. We have to get very specific. Non-Apple tech product. Can I say Starlink? I mean, I don't use it anymore, but I just think that that's technology. But I just think that what it enables is amazing. Like, I think it's very, very impressive technology. The fact that through reusable rocket boosters like the Falcon 9, they've been able to send up like thousands of individual satellites that are at low Earth orbit, that are submitting a frequency that enables you to have like hundreds of megabits download in the rain, in the hail, in the snow, and anywhere on the planet. There's now people using Starlink in Antarctica. Like, there's people in Antarctica using the same fast internet service that is available here. It's like this global internet connectivity, which is kind of amazing, and you can use it on devices in motion. That's going to increase the speed of internet on planes. Airlines are basically all switching to Starlink because it's objectively better than any current internet provider for planes. All cruise ships are switching to, any boat really is switching to Starlink, because they could be in the middle of the ocean and still get hundreds of megabits download. So it's just something that didn't exist just a couple years ago that now enables fast internet globally, as long as you have line of sight of the sky. And I think it's something we're all going to benefit from over the course of our lives. And it's been very helpful in Ukraine because there's no other internet option there. Lots of people still using Starlink. So, like, I just think it's a very impressive product that I got to witness the launch and unfolding of. Even though it doesn't make sense for everybody, if you have fiber, if you have 5G home internet, that's probably going to be cheaper. But what it unlocks for humanity, I just think is really, really cool. And I still have the hardware for it, but I don't use the service anymore because T-Mobile beat it in my area. The reason the Messages app is green is because by default the messages are green. iMessage is what makes them blue. Yeah, we know that, Aaron. But people are just saying most Apple's expecting you to have an iPhone that communicates with an iPhone. SMS is really bad, and Apple's answer to that was, well, you should buy an iPhone and use iMessage. They don't want to support RCS. So for the same way that AirDrop is kind of only works through iPhones, and yet that's a very common option that shows up right away. Like, the phone assumes all of you and your friends have iPhones already. So why doesn't it assume that most of the people you're texting on iMessage are blue. I don't think it matters, again, at the end of the day. I think that they changed the color of app icons based on how the home screen looks. They just don't want too many colors of the same kind. They want it to look like a rich, vibrant home screen. That's why a couple of years ago they changed the Apple Music icon from white to red. Doesn't really mean anything for the app. It's just they wanted the home screen to look a bit more equal when it comes to all the colors that are being shown. So, do you think the charge limiter will actually come out? I keep asking for it. I mean, there's no rumors of it coming. I haven't seen any. I don't even think Android has a charge limiter. Maybe there's a third-party way to do it, but natively, I don't think it has one. But there's been lots of things that I've asked for years that there was no leaks or rumors to suggest what I asked for, and then it ended up happening. You know, like for years I was saying USB-C makes the most sense on the iPhone, and I think Apple should switch to Type-C, and no one in the leak community said that would happen. Everyone was like, no, they're just going to switch to portless. Next year will be portless. They're just going to keep using Lightning until portless comes around. And I kept saying portless is a bad idea. You know, it's going to create more problems than it solves. It's going to worsen sales? I was trying to say weaken. That doesn't sound right. I was like, the portless iPhone, like at this point when Apple is struggling to come up with reasons to get you to buy an iPhone, they should not take away things that convince you to not buy the new iPhone. You know, like so many people are holding into iPhones for longer and longer. If you start taking away things that are useful, that a lot of people take advantage of, that's going to impact and use on a daily basis. You know, I think eSIM was annoying for a lot of people, but it's usually something that you have to deal with once every couple of years. And yeah, there's a lot of people in the tech community that were like, I would never buy a portless phone. And there's a lot of people that didn't like the idea. But there was a lot of people in favor of USB-C because they're already using Type-C on the MacBook and on the iPad. And to the EU, forcing it, again, that doesn't mean they have to do it here, but for manufacturing efficiency, it makes a lot of sense to just switch to it everywhere. Reduce sales, that's it. Yeah, thank you, James. So I was saying for years before the leaks came out that Apple would switch it to Type-C. I was saying for a long time that this is the most logical outcome. Keeping Lightning is a waste, and you can easily switch all Lightning cables to USB-C cables with an adapter. Like USB-C, I just thought was the most logical way forward, and that's why I kept saying that they should do it, even though there was no rumors suggesting it. So in a similar way, in my wish lists and in my videos, I don't know if Apple saw them, or it doesn't even matter if Apple sees them or not. But if I can just send a message to the community and send to lots of people, hey, you should be able to limit the charge of your Mac or your iPad, and now there's lots of people talking about that, or lots of people suggesting that to Apple. I do think that we kind of together we vote with our wallets, and Apple does listen to us sometimes. They brought back the legacy ports, and against my wishes, they got rid of the touch bar. They didn't get rid of it because of what I said, because I like the touch bar, but they got rid of it because lots of people were complaining about it. So if we have enough people complaining about the lack of charge limiter, who knows? Maybe they'll eventually cave and just say, yeah, you know what? No, why not? It's not a very complicated line of code. It's very simple. So it wouldn't take much time. And again, if you don't care about the charge limiter or don't want to use it, then nothing changes. So I don't think it really hurts anything by being there as an option. So yeah, I'll keep asking for it in hopes that Apple at least can hear the voice, if not through me, through the community. I don't think they should add back the headphone jack personally. I don't think it was, in the age of wireless, it wasn't going to be used all that much, but it's not the same thing with a port. You can easily replace the functionality of a headphone jack with a port, but if you get rid of the port entirely, now it's a lot harder to replace. Sir Quetry says portless was never going to happen. You would be able to discharge the battery to the point that you couldn't bring it back without a charging port. At least that's my understanding. You can charge something from dead inductively. That's not hard. I've done that many times. You can design it in a way that it receives power through the charge coil. Even if it's completely dead, it doesn't need you just hover it over the charge coil and it charges back up. This is how Apple Watches work. Apple Watches don't have ports. They had a maintenance port for a while, but they got rid of it on the Series 7. So the Series 7, 8, and the Ultra, and I believe the SE2, none of those have maintenance ports on them either. But they die and then charge up again after years of not having a charge, just through inductive coils. So that's not the problem with portless. I'm not saying it's technically impossible to do portless. It's very possible. It's very easy, honestly. It's just not a good idea. Chris Norton super chat, a different topic. I'm on an MVNO and I can't get eSIM, so I'm moving back to one of the big four. Oh, really? I didn't know that was possible. So I know you're not in the U.S., but I apologize. Why do you need eSIM so bad, though? If you're not in the U.S., shouldn't iPhone 14 have a SIM tray or whatever? The people that didn't like the touch bar, I guarantee, were almost all YouTubers. Well, it wasn't me. I love the touch bar. I wanted them to bring it to the MacBook Air, and I did concept art on some of my old videos of the 12-inch MacBook, which I love the design of. I just didn't like the specs. But it was a beautiful design, and I was like, man, this 12-inch MacBook with a touch bar and thin bezels, oh, that would be beautiful. But no, enough people complained about the touch bar that they got rid of it. So, I mean, the people we know about complaining it are usually YouTubers, because you don't talk to people that aren't making YouTube videos that often, or you don't hear from people that aren't making YouTube videos that often, because how would you know about that? Waiting for 25,000 excuses from Apple why they don't need to implement the charge limiter. Well, their logic is probably just that optimized battery charging is good enough, and that over time they would rather you have a more depleted battery life so that you can upgrade again. I love the idea of a charge limiter. I try very hard to keep my iPhone 13 between 40 and 80%. With a great battery, it's easy. Probably wouldn't use it much on an 8. Yeah, I don't see the harm in it. If you leave it off by default, if you're that worried about it, just bake it into settings. I'm not saying it needs to be easy to access. You could bury it in there with battery health and stuff. Like you'd have to turn it on. You have to go to settings and battery and open battery health, and then down here you could have a little kind of like how when you set your alarm, there's little numbers, you tap on it and scroll through the dial and just say set a charge limit, and there's little gray text that says setting a charge limit prevents the phone from charging past a certain point to extend its life. And you just select the percentage. It could be 90, it could be 80, depending on how you use your phone. You could put it all the way down to 50 if you want. And then as long as that is turned on, the battery just stops whenever it hits that percentage amount. It would not be complicated. And again, you can leave it off by default. So if you think that if your logic is, well, it's too complicated or it's a little too picky, just make it so that you don't notice it if you don't turn it on. Like if you don't care about it, you won't even know it's there. Elizabeth says, I had the touch bar, I liked it, and I don't miss it. I mean, I obviously I can live without it. It's not the end of the world, but if I had the option of having it or not having it, I'd rather have it. You know how Apple will release the iPhone 18 series in 2026? 15, 16, 17. Yeah, I think that's right. What do you think they will do in 2027 with the iPhone 20th anniversary? Skip the 19 series again and make the 20 series? I don't think Apple ever explicitly said that they did something special for the 10th year anniversary. I mean, they called it iPhone 10 probably just because it sounded good marketing-wise and it felt like a big upgrade, and the number 9 is kind of just marketing-wise, it's not a good idea, I guess. That's why Microsoft didn't do Windows 9 either. It sounds too close to 10, and 10 is a round number. So if you say 9, it kind of makes everything feel like something else is coming around the corner. And they use the Roman numeral and everything. So I don't think there will necessarily be a 20th anniversary edition iPhone that's substantially different. Or I wouldn't be surprised if they change the naming scheme, but I don't think that means they'll call it iPhone 20. They might call it something else. They might skip the numbers entirely and just turn it into model years. I think that's the best outcome. I don't think we need to keep calling it 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. I think you should just... it's the same thing when phones get so incremental and there's so few changes year over year. That's when you just go by the model year. It's like there's very little changes between the Toyota Camry year over year. So that's why we call it, is this the 2023 model or the 2022 model? They don't call it the Toyota Camry 57 or 56 or whatever generation they're on. I don't even know what they're on. It's not like we had Tesla Model 3 and then a year goes by Model 4, Model 5, Model 6. No, it's like as the tech gets more saturated and mature and there's very little noticeable changes, then I would just say, yeah, just call it by the year. This is the iPhone 2025 edition. This is the iPhone 2027 edition. I know it's kind of a mouthful, but it's going to end that way anyway. I think Samsung's approach was actually the smartest. Because obviously for the next century, we're going to have to say 20 something, 2023, 2024. Just drop the first 20. Maybe just skip all the way. Just go, yeah, iPhone Pro 23. That comes out this year. That's the, or maybe put the 23 in the middle, I guess. But Samsung skipped it. They went straight to from S10 to S20 to line up with 2020. So now it just matches the model year, which I think is fine. Or because iPhones tend to launch in September, you might call it next year. So this year we would get the iPhone 24 because most of its life will be in 2024. And then next September you get the iPhone 25. To me, that's like the most efficient naming scheme you can get. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck calling it 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and it doesn't line up with the year. It's already kind of awkward that the iPhone number doesn't align with the A chip number. It's like the iPhone 14 has the A16. No. iPhone 14 Pro has the A16, and the iPhone 14 has A15, and the iPhone 15 will have the A17. Like, it's so weird, all these numbers. Thank you for the super chat, Chris. I'm in the UK. I want eSIM because I'm into tech, and eSIM is easy because of my disability. Okay, well, that's good. I'm sorry your MVNO doesn't support it, though. That's a shame. But I appreciate the donation. Let's see. You could even make it so 100% is actually only 80% of the actual capacity for those with OCD who want to use the charge limiter but feel like it's full. I guess so. That might get a little confusing, but yeah, that's technically possible. Yeah, most things, MacBooks drop the numbers. iPads drop the numbers. Apple Watch just says series for some reason. But yeah, I don't know why we're keeping the numbers on the iPhone for so long. I wouldn't be surprised that it's at some point in the next 5 years they change the naming away from numbers and go with something else. It's always 2 numbers off, yeah. Let's see. The Apple Watch Series 9 got promotion. Would you upgrade to it? I mean, maybe older Drew would, but now my iPhone doesn't have it either, so I'm close to downgrading my Apple Watch, or I came close to downgrading it, if anything. I'm not on the camp anymore of like I need to have latest and greatest thing. I think there's enough people in the Apple tech community that are pushing that narrative that we just all need to buy the latest tech, and it doesn't matter how expensive it is or how insignificant the upgrade is. We just need to buy it and have it because I'm a YouTuber, so I got to review it. But they review it after 2 weeks and then they use it for a year and then buy a new one. And I just think that sets a bad example, and it convinces a lot of people that makes people feel like they need to upgrade when they don't. So that's why I'm trying to lean into more of budget discussions on how cheap you can get phones. Like my mind was blown with how affordable this phone has become. You can find these on eBay refurbished for like $100, and it has the A13 chip in it. This will probably get software support for another 3 years. It has wireless charging, and it's running the latest version of iOS. It's beautiful, by the way, and it has a decent camera with portrait mode on both sides. The only downside is, I guess, the bezels are kind of big. The home button, if you don't like that, and maybe Face ID is better. And I understand. I prefer Face ID myself, but just as far as, like, you just need a good, reliable phone that works, this is an incredible value. $100 for something that will get software support as long as basically a new Galaxy Android flagship would get. Like a $1,000 Android is probably going to get about 3 years of software support today, and this $100 iPhone is also going to probably get about 3 years of support. So I'm leaning more towards the value propositions. I'm not as into buying new thing because it has certain spec. You can create a really stupid charge limiter with Siri shortcuts. Yeah, I know. We talked about it a while. It doesn't stop charging, but you can set it to do power-heavy tasks after a selected percentage, so the battery never reaches 100%. Yeah, that kind of defeats the point of trying to prioritize battery health again. Why do I have my wife's phone? She uses her iPad for a lot of the basic stuff, so I just have it in here as a reference point. It's beautiful. Look at it. There has never been a cleaner. I'm tempted to switch to this thing, to be honest with you. Maybe if my iPhone 10 doesn't get iOS 17, I'll try this. Maybe I'll swap with my wife, because this is such a beautiful phone. And the biggest downsides are just the screen. But it's not like it's dimmer. Like the iPhone 10 has the same brightness as the SE2. I'm not using the ceramic Apple Watch anymore. I just decided that it wasn't a good investment because basically I was willing to do it if I could break even. If I could sell my Series 7 and that would cover the price of the ceramic 5, I would do it. But the way the battery health was on the 5 and the way things were looking based on the offers I was getting for this watch, I'm still trying to sell this watch, by the way. I still think that I can justify downgrading if I make money or break even, but I'm not going to pay extra money to get a worse product. That just seems silly. And also I see a lot of influence on, like, when I downgrade my phone, I see a lot of my audience downgrade too. And like, I think a lot of people tend to follow what some of their favorite creators they watch. They tend to do what they do. And I didn't want to set the expectation of paying more for worse tech. It's like, I'll pay extra money to upgrade if I need to upgrade for something, but I don't think I should pay extra money to downgrade something. And also, the ceramic Apple Watch is cool, but I couldn't get it to match with many other watch bands. It looks really good with a white or black band, but that's about it. And my favorite watch bands are red and blue. So red's my favorite color, which is why I'm rocking this one. And I was like, yeah, it doesn't really look that great with the ceramic watch chassis, and I also prefer the screen of this one. So, I'm willing to downgrade if I can sell my Series 7, but so far I haven't had that many offers. Ollie says he just picked up a ceramic Apple Watch Series 5 after watching your video. I'm loving it so far. The thing is gorgeous. Well, there you go. See, it's the influence of it. I'm glad you're loving it. I hope you got it for a good price as well. The message was retracted, but thank you, Mr. Guide, for the super chat. I appreciate it. You should move the iPad to the kitchen. I could. It's more just about how it gets charged, and I do use the iPad to do thumbnail design on occasion. Do I have a video that you were excited to post, but it dramatically underperformed? Oh yeah, most of my videos I feel like that. Probably the ceramic Apple Watch one. I thought, I was debating, like, maybe if the video performed well enough, like if my audience expressed a lot of interest in reviewing that one in particular, because they don't make ceramic Apple Watches anymore, and that was like the last ceramic Apple Watch basically that they released. I thought maybe if I got kind of a collector's niche or nostalgia effect with that video, I would consider keeping it, even if I couldn't sell my Series 7, just for the sake of, well, the video did really, really well, so I can justify keeping it. But yeah, it performed good. It performed pretty well, but it didn't really take off the way that downgrading to the iPhone 10 did really, really well. My video on living with the iPhone 10 in 2023, that got way more views than any of my videos have in months. So I was like, okay, maybe there's kind of a market for me reviewing older tech or talking about living with older tech on this channel. But I think it's mostly restricted to the iPhone. I don't think downgrading my MacBook or downgrading my iPad would result in the same amount of interest or audience generation. Not that that really matters. I'm not doing this for the views. I'm not doing this to grow. That's why I straight up asked people to unsubscribe a few weeks ago, just because I was like, yeah, I don't need the channel to be big, and that's not important to me. But if I do like making content that lots of people find interesting, so I'm trying to figure out ways of like, how do we make content that people want to watch, and if more people want to watch videos on the older tech, then I'll do more older tech stuff. But I just didn't feel the need to keep the watch for the sake of. I don't think the long-term review of that watch was going to be very interesting for a lot of people. Do I think a new Apple Watch Ultra 2 will come this year? I wanted Ultra, but I need a new one to come out to get discounts on the current one. I think so. They upgrade the regular Series 8, Series 7 watches. They upgrade those every year. And I don't see why they wouldn't upgrade the Ultra. I don't think it'll be a big upgrade. It's possible they'll just have one new color, like a space black titanium, and then a new chip. And the chip is a little bit faster, or if they put a new health sensor in the Series 9, they'll have to put that new chip in the Ultra as well. That would make sense to me. So yeah, I think there will be a new one, but I think it will look very, very similar to the current one. There's been very little leaks and rumors about Apple Watches this year, so I expect it's going to be a pretty dry update. I'm glad you have no regrets, James, with your upgrade. A lot of tech channels are getting super boring the past few years. Yeah, it's not necessarily their fault. I think it's just the tech in general is getting pretty boring. Like, there's not that much new information. There's not that much big changes year over year anymore. So lots of channels are taking the dry news and the boring news in different ways. Some of them, and a lot of them, unfortunately, have to resort to clickbait, meaning you have to make not so exciting stories act like they're a big deal. Like, this changes everything, or oh my God, you got to get more gullible, believe every single leak and rumor. It doesn't matter if you personally believe it or not. It just matters that, well, it would look good for a title or would look good for a thumbnail. So people get more desperate and they start using things like confirmed or unveiled, or, like they act like things are official and they try to make things feel like a bigger deal than they really are. It's like, okay, in reality, nothing was confirmed. We just heard someone claim something, and a YouTuber has to get kind of desperate to maintain their business expenses because they inflated their budget. And other channels may just stop uploading as much, or my approach has been, let's talk more about older tech and what you can find at a discount. Let's find more budget-friendly options, since we'll talk about the new stuff. I'm not saying we're moving away from the new stuff. It's just there's less new stuff to talk about. The changes rumored for the new iPads or the new Macs or the new iPhones is just not that major. So if there's not that much stuff to talk about, then let's talk about the older stuff, because that exists and that's out, and we can look at prices and find them at discounted rates, and figure out how to be more content and more grateful for what we have, essentially, rather than focus on what we don't have. And my other approach has been to move more into tech content that I find more interesting. So I personally find electric vehicle content far more exciting and far more innovative and far more interesting than what's going on with smartphones and tablets and stuff. Every year, EV content gets more interesting. There's more startups entering the game. There's more legacy automakers switching to electric vehicles. And then there's Tesla doing more crazy things, offering more things, and prices changing, and affordability, and there's more education to be done on how fast charging works, and battery health and DC charging locations are becoming more plentiful. So I diversified by making more EV content. I started an EV channel, and that's been going really, really well, to be honest. And I've had a lot of fun talking about EVs over there, and reviewing them and driving them, and speculating on future ones, and talking about approaches and battery packs and startups, and which ones make sense and which ones don't make sense. And I find that really exciting and interesting. So over time, these days, I don't really watch videos on iPhones or Apple or anything. But I watch a lot of videos on electric cars, because I think that's like, in terms of the adoption curve, we're very early in the stages of EVs. Whereas smartphones, wireless headphones or smartwatches and stuff, we've kind of finished that S curve of adoption. I remember when I was a kid, not that many people have them, and now I've witnessed the explosion of the smartphone market, and there's so many of them, and then they become cheaper, and now pretty much everybody has one. Even people I know that don't watch social media or don't partake in Facebook or any of that stuff, they still have smartphones. Everybody kind of switched over to the point now where it's just, okay, what can Apple think of next? And not that much. So it's kind of stagnated and it's kind of matured, which is fine. That's why I'm trying to focus the tech content. That's why we do the skits, try to make it more funny, because the news itself is kind of dry. Whereas the EV stuff is still very much in the early days, and there's a lot more adoption and a lot more education that has to take place before that market has matured and is kind of stabilized. Who is on your Mount Rushmore of tech YouTubers? Pick 4. Hasael asked me that after I just said I don't really watch tech YouTubers anymore. I guess I would pick MKBHD, John Morrison. I'm biased because I've met both of them. Dave 2D is great, and Flossie Carter. I like Flossie. I don't know if he's on your list, but yeah, I love Flossie Carter. I don't watch any of those guys very much anymore, but when I have, I've always saw good things. Let's see. I still don't own an Apple Watch because you have to charge it. I guess you can't own an iPhone either. You got to charge that. My Apple Watch battery lasts way longer than my iPhone. Let's see. You used to recommend the Series 4 a lot. I missed when you stopped recommending it. I'm just wondering about your current attitude. What do I consider now? I don't own an Apple Watch yet. My go-to recommendation is typically a eBay refurbished steel Series 5. I mean, I used to recommend the Series 4, but now the Series 4 has gotten a lot older. It's probably less likely to get software support as long as the Series 5 will. But the reason I do that is because I've researched prices on the aftermarket, and I don't recommend people buy aluminum watches because the glass is very fragile and it scratches very quickly. And I feel like you'll regret buying it a lot faster because of how it ages. But the steel watches have the sapphire glass, and you can find eBay refurbished Series 5s made of steel with the sapphire glass for under $200. For less money than it costs to buy an Apple Watch SE2, which practically looks the same size display as the Series 5. Plus, on the Series 5, not only is it more durable and the glass is amazing, but you also get ECG. S5 chip is decent. And again, you can find those for under 200. You can find them from like 180, 170, 160, that kind of ballpark range. So that's what I would recommend. Michael just bought one. He says, I wanted a cheap Apple Watch, ended up getting a Steel Series 5 with 90% battery health. It performs great and lasts all day, plus the sapphire screen is still perfect. Awesome. Glad to hear that. I'm very happy to hear that. Let's see. I bought a titanium Series 7 for $500. That's a pretty good deal. I mean, it's not cheaper than like a new regular Series 7, but yeah, it's definitely cheaper than buying a new titanium one. Michael got his for $160. That's a really good deal. Carl says, I hope my iPhone 10 gets iOS 17. I've just had Apple put a new battery in it after the last one I've had since launch swelled up at 74% battery health. Yikes. Yeah, I do too. Yeah, the battery replacement costs have gone up too. Let's see. The stupid faces and thumbnail. I refuse to click those videos. Yeah, I mean, sometimes I put a face in the thumbnail if I have an opinion on something, but I try not to do the clickbait, like, unless it is something kind of exciting. Like, I think I did something like this, or like when I ordered my Tesla, but that's not something you do every day, right? That's a pretty rare, like, exciting thing. So if it's actually an exciting, like, okay, big deal video, I can kind of get it. But when it's just like the iPhone 15 might have solid state buttons, I'm not going, like that's not that reaction. I don't think that's how you react when you read that information. Let's see. I didn't realize the Series 5 brought the sapphire glass. No, they've had sapphire glass long before the Series 5. Pretty much every Apple Watch that's not made of aluminum has sapphire glass. Even the Apple Watch Series 0, they had sapphire glass on all the steel ones and the gold ones and the ceramic ones and the titanium ones. As long as it's not made of aluminum, it has sapphire glass. It's not introduced on the Series 5. Who cares about watchOS updates now? And I wondered, why not Series 4? Series 4, you can still get the sapphire glass, but I just figure most people... I don't personally mind. I don't have an always-on display turned on because I like the display when it's all the way off. But most people I've talked to have preferred having always-on displays. So that's why I say Series 5, because I know those will have always-on. So I'm like, that kind of alleviates that concern. Also, that's something else you get with the Series 5 that you don't get on the SE. The SE 1 or 2 does not have always-on, whereas the Series 5 does. I forgot about Techno Buffalo. I haven't watched him either. Nothing against him. I watch EV content pretty much exclusively now. I hope iPadOS 17 has a calculator app. That would be appropriate. The Series 0 is kind of weird. That's what we're referring to when we're talking about the Apple Watch Sport, basically, is what Apple called it. But there was an Apple Watch before the Series 1. The Series 1 and the Series 2 actually came out at the exact same time. So they launched the first Apple Watch, and it was called the Sport back then. And then there was a steel one that was just called Apple Watch. They didn't call it Apple Watch Series 1. They didn't call it Apple Watch 1 or anything. It was just Apple Watch, and then Apple Watch Edition was the solid gold ones. But then when the Series 2 came out, they also refreshed the first gen Apple Watch Sport and called it the Series 1. And it had the new chip, the same chip as the Series 2, but it wasn't water resistant, and I think the design was a little bit different. It was a little bit less rounded than the Series 2 was, and the display wasn't as bright as the Series 2. So Apple never officially called it the Series 0, but that's what we referred to as the first Apple Watch, the one that came out before the Series 1, because technically the Series 1 is not the first Apple Watch, which I know is confusing, but yeah. I thought it was pointless because Raise to Tap to Wake was so reliable. I've never had issues with the display turning on. It's very quick whenever I do move my wrist. So yeah, I don't think it's important, but other people seem to think it's important. So I assume that's as far back as you need to go, because that has the it also has the compass. Remember, gotta have the compass. Could you still see yourself becoming one of the biggest EV channels since you're an OG in the space, similar to how Justine or Linus are so huge because they're some of the first? No, I don't think so. I think that usually the channels that review electric cars and get, firsthand exclusives, there's already big tech channels that can kind of easily convert over to EV channels. It's not a completely separate space. There's a lot of overlap between tech and EV. So if you're a Marquez or already iJustine and Linus, they get early access to cars long before I could, just because they already have a big audience. And the channels that are buying and flipping and reviewing EVs all the time, they usually get the most clicks. Mine is more speculative, and we just talk news and updates and, that kind of thing. So I don't think I'll be one of the biggest or anything, and I don't want to be. That's a lot of pressure. I'm okay being the small. My whole goal with the current Tailosive network is sustainability. I just want to sustain the size we're currently at, unless there's one exception to that. Unless we're talking about the Tailosive EV podcast, which is only, how close are we? We're only 122 subscribers away. Only 122 subscribers away from getting that channel monetized. And then we can actually make money off of the EV podcast. We've hit the watch time requirement. We're like over twice the watch time requirement. So please, I put the link in the chat. Please subscribe to the EV podcast channel just so we can hit 1,000 subscribers and get monetized, and then unsubscribe. I don't need you to be subscribed to it. I know that might not be your thing. I literally just need 122 people to click the subscribe button so that we can check the box and says, okay, now it's monetized. And then once we're monetized, unsubscribe. I don't care. I think we just need to check that box so that we can actually make money off of all the work we put into those podcasts, which takes several hours out of the week for everybody. A lot of time and a lot of commitment is put into that show, and YouTube doesn't bring in anything. So you don't need to watch the videos. I'm not asking you to watch the podcast. Please just hit the subscribe button so that we can, on that channel that I just posted in the chat. Thank you guys. I appreciate you. If we got 152 people watching, if just 122 of you hit the sub button on that link, then we'd be good to go. And then you can unsub. So I'm not about like making sure all my channels are big and huge, or I don't care about that. I just want to sustain what we currently have. That would be enough for me. I got an email from Apple about an Apple Pay exclusive deal with McDonald's. I did see that. I might take advantage of it. Although I don't love it because you have to buy something. You have to spend $1 in order to get the promo. Yeah, I did watch Jerry Rig videos. Jerry Rig Everything's video on the Aptera. That was cool. Do you not lose monetization if you dip below 1,000 subs? I don't think so. I've never tested that theory, but I know that you don't lose monetization when you dip below 4,000 hours. So I assume that as long as the channel is active, if you get manually approved once, they don't really care if you fall below the threshold as long as you're active, which we are very active on there. Like the requirement for YouTube is 4,000 hours of watch time, and we're at like over 10,000 hours of watch time. We're like way past the watch time requirement. We just don't get enough people to hit the subscribe button because we usually never ask them to. I don't like asking people to subscribe. The YouTube requirement is literally the only reason why I'm asking you. After that, I'll never ask again, I promise. So please, once again, check that out. And I need to get going here. We've got some family stuff happening, but I appreciate your guys' questions and your super chats. You guys have been awfully generous today. And very special shout out to our insanely generous and crazy Tailosive Tech Ultra members, Tyler Forte, Riley McGinnis, Bobby Forsey, Chris, and Hasayel. You guys are awesome. Way too generous. And I appreciate all of you. Thanks for watching. And I hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Bye-bye.